If our team goes into an investigation, we want to know all the information as the people in charge before we go in. Sometimes that conversation at the beginning is all somebody needs in order to feel better in their space, right? Ultimately, we going in can't say, yes, you have a haunting, and have everybody say, yes, we all agree there's a haunting in this place, right? As paranormal people, yes, we might have some similar ideas on things, right? But our goal isn't necessarily to come in and say, yes, you have a ghost, or no, you don't have a ghost. Our goal is to help our clients understand what's happening to the best of our ability, right? Now, that doesn't mean we can explain everything or help you understand everything, but we can come in and help you feel comfortable in your space. So I can use an example of a case we did in Dallas, Oregon. And the lady, when she would call me, she was reporting that there was a little girl downstairs and a grumpy old man upstairs, and that her grandkids had seen the little girl. And so she would leave out these two dolls, on a chair off to the side, and she would leave on cartoons when they'd leave during the day, but she didn't want to have anything to do with it. She didn't want to see him. She didn't want to hear about it. But her grandkids had seen him. And I don't want to see him. She would take the phone outside onto the porch when she would call me, so that the girl couldn't hear her talking about her and cause more activity, right? And so we decided to take that case, and we went down there and did an investigation. And the evidence we got, there was an EVP. Well, first of all, when we got there, the family was so open, right? So welcoming. They had made us dinner, and oh my gosh, the house felt so warm, and it was just a good positive energy, right? It felt very motherly. She felt like a very motherly person, right? Later on that evening, we got an EVP. Well, we didn't discover until we went through the review, that it basically sounded on two different recorders. What is it that you want, mommy? Right? When we played that for her, it was like watching everything, all that fear melt away. And she, like, this other instinct took over, where she was like, I want to see this thing, I want to take care of her, I want to, that for us is a huge success. That's a huge measure of success for us, because now she's not afraid to live in her house. Now she wants to see it. Now she wants to interact with what's going on there. And that's our goal. That's our goal as a group, is to be able to help people feel better in their space.
What happened to Grumpy?
Grumpy was there. At least we heard Grumpy, and we just kind of did our best. There's an understanding. To not get into it too much, my belief is that Grumpy was almost kind of there to take care of her too. At one point, what we heard was like, just leave her alone, right? We're like trying to, so like, there was kind of like a nurturing piece to that as well, although it wasn't nurturing to us, but nurturing to her, right? So, and she still didn't, and the lady still didn't want to see Grumpy, but having the understanding of, the scariest thing is walking around the corner and seeing somebody who's not there, right? It's not really malicious. It's never done anything to me. It's never like hurt anybody. It's just, that initial frightening thing. And once our client understood that, it changed everything. It really changed everything. And she became like, and to the point where she'd be like, just leave us alone, just be. And she got a little, in Spanish they would use bochi, right? She would get like, don't yell at them, like reprimanding the ghost, the grumpy ghost. So it was cool to like help them be able to take over their space. When I talk to somebody the first time, before we get out to do an investigation, I tell them, keep a log, keep a journal, talk to it and see if that'll, hey, this is our space. These are the rules if you want to be here. And lay them down as a family or as yourself in your area. And sometimes that's just enough. But it's that first piece of talking to them and saying, listen, I understand what you're saying. Here's some possible suggestions. Document it. It's giving people something to do, because up to that point they've had nothing, right? They're just the receivers of all this experience, right? If we do decide to take a case, we don't always take cases, because sometimes they're really far away and we get really backed up with a bunch of cases. there's the next step, and I don't know who's talking about the next step. Who's next?
Tristan.
Tristan. We want to do, I'm thinking historical research. We want to find out more about it, so I'll turn it over to Tristan.
All right. So whenever Scott or Casey get a case, they usually try to get with me beforehand, and they try to give me at least a 2 to 4 week window. So when I conduct my research, I have enough time to gather the facts and info on the area. A lot of it, I don't know how many of you are new to the field or have an interest in doing the research part. A lot of it was trial and error for me. I kind of wanted to develop my own system instead of following what someone else was doing. So I found it helpful to, Google searching, going on to state archives. One of our biggest things was using the Oregonian archives. We found out that some areas in Portland, county or city, sometimes they didn't have the best records. So sometimes you can find that one key article that was missing that could help you further in your investigation. Another thing I like to get is info on the property. I like to know when the house was built. One thing I like to do is I'll find out what county or city the house is located in. And I like to go to the county surveyor. They have a lot of info on the geological area of the soil, what the house is built on. And they also have aerial photos of what the area used to look like. So they can use that info in an investigation to spark whatever is going to happen that night. Another thing also is if a client claims that someone died in the house, I kind of like to get that fact and back it up. A lot of the times I'll be driving down to the state capital of Salem and try to find a death record. The one hurdle I've encountered over the last few years is there are certain laws in place to protect current families of the deceased. So sometimes that record won't be available for so many years. So then I have to go back through to the Oregonian or local newspapers and search your obituaries and find the actual dates of when the person is deceased. Trying to think what else. I think it pretty much covers it. Does anyone have any questions or?
Do you give this information to the investigators before, or do you compare it after their investigation to what it could be?
A lot of the times I will get with Scott and Casey. I'll give them all the info I got. Some of the times they'll keep some of that to themselves. Other times they'll share it with the investigators, like let them know, like, oh hey, this house is built on this kind of property or this area. And it's also nice, you can give the property owner a little souvenir, like, hey, this is what your house used to look like before the area got developed.
Is there generally a fee for certain records or?
Occasionally, usually I bring $5 with me. Usually I find out, like a good example, if I go to Clackamas County Records over here in Oregon City area, they'll usually charge me like 20 cents a page, sometimes 10.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very helpful to go talk to people because all that information is provided for you.
So Tristan, explain to them a little bit about going down to Salem and going through the archive department because of the fact that there's a lot of stuff that's not digitized yet.
Yeah, that's another good thing. A lot of the state archives, they still use microfilm. They don't have everything digitized just yet. So when I'm going there, if you ever do that or go down there, they'll like register you, get your little pass. But you're going to be handling like sensitive documents. There's like, I was handling a death certificate that was 100 years old, and it was like to the date. It was telling me exactly when the person died. And a lot of it, I had to handle the death certificate with gloves. It was that sensitive. But they'll also, they'll let you make a copy as long as it's at that period. Another thing we found helpful too was especially is getting with historical societies. A lot of the times your local city won't have all the info, but they'll gather like info from people that have lived there, like stories and newspaper articles, photos. That's another thing that helps back up everything.
I'm from Yakima and I go on Ancestry. I find out who the previous owner and then go on Ancestry.
Oh, that's perfect. I never thought about that. That's
Any
good to-
dates and then I go to the newspaper and pull out their.
Another thing with their skits, we had a case years ago where it fell through, but we were able to find out, we found out when the person died, that they actually died on the property. And it was fun because we found a lot of history on that family, and newspaper articles are saying, like, we found somebody was getting sued for slander because some guy's wife was accusing someone of something. So it's always fun. You're finding little pieces of Portland and Oregon history. It's always something that always strikes my mind that makes me happy.
Do you have a typical time frame that it takes you to research?
Depending on like the location, like if we're further out from Portland, I'll get usually about a month notice, and then I'll try and get with the county excuse me. I'll try and email somebody through the county and get in contact. They'll usually direct me to their archives, and if there's a certain archive I can't get, they can usually will forward it to a local. They'll forward a copy to someone else that I can get a printed copy of.
Oh, okay.
So they're always they're always willing and helpful.
So, like, say what's the shortest time frame you've had for research on a property?
Shortest time frame I've had was a week. I got the info right away. We were going to do the investigation that weekend. So every day I was getting up super early before I had to go to my job, going down to records and getting info. So I usually try to get at least, a nice little stack of info. And I also found it helpful, I always carried my notebook with me. I like to take notes. Sometimes they won't let you make a copy of something, so I just have to write down key infos. It's also helpful too, also with the land surveyor. They can also give you a detailed list of names of people who owned the land before and who donated it to who. Yes?
Do they let you take camera phone pictures, like of maps and things?
No, that's the one thing I've been told, because you're in there, they got all their security, they'll make you pay for it. Who's next, or who's presenting?
Who's next?
Casey, with technology.
Thank you.
So there's no shortage of technology when it comes to what we do. It seems like the TV shows seem to be coming out with a bunch of stuff that everybody needs to jump on right away. But the one thing that we tell all our investigators and everybody that comes to us is, first off, there's no quantifiable way to detect or measure a ghost. There's no one device out there that says, this is what you're looking at, this is what it is, this is who it is, blah, blah, blah. If that were the case, it wouldn't be paranormal, and it would be science. That being said, I won't be able to tell you the best EMF gauge or ghost finder. So what we like to focus on, and we see a lot of issues with, and it's across the gamut, whether it's cryptozoology or ufology, is the lack of really crisp either audio or visual data. You see a lot of, Michael and I go back and forth all the time with the red circle around the blurry picture. If you have to put a red circle in a picture to show us what you're looking at, then there's an issue. And so what we wanted to do is have some of the nicest cameras that are available and that are affordable to us to try and capture that kind of evidence. So our DVR system, for example, we've just recently upgraded about a year and a half ago to a PoE system, which is short for Power over Ethernet. The nice part about it is it's network cable. So we're afforded the ability to go 400 feet per camera without losing signal or clarity of our image. Whether it's during the daylight or at night, we get a wider angle on our images. It's really a nice technology. If any of you, I know that some of you here with groups, it's a huge step above the BNC technology that we started out with. Was very fuzzy, very grainy. It's very nice.
What kind of frame rate did you guys get that?
It's 35 or 30 frames per second.
So still 30 frames per second?
Yeah, 30 frames per second. We're at 720 high def. We're not quite at the 1080, but it's leap years above where we were. And the picture quality when we pull it off the DVR is, it's beautiful compared to what we were with. And so another thing that we use are the nicer cameras. We don't use the Instamatics and stuff. We don't go into a location and just start snapping pictures like this, because we're gonna get motion blur because of the body moving, and we tailor, of course, the camera settings to whatever location we're at. And this was just a standard DSLR, but we have a very high quality Canon T3i full spectrum camera, which is really nice. But one of the things that we do as well is anytime we're in a location, the cameras are set up on tripods. We don't want to have any of that blur. And we also use digital remotes for the cameras, because even if they're on the tripod, just pushing the button, we're causing a shake in the image, and we want to have that crisp picture, because if there's anything there, we want to be able to say without any doubt that there's no blur. And so since we started, we haven't found anything we can't explain. And I kind of like that, because it tells me that everybody on our team is being very stringent on the analysis process, which Michael will get into in a little while.
Casey?
Yeah.
Can't explain from pictures.
What?
Nothing we can.
Anything we've captured on film, we haven't been able to explain away. Anywhere from light refraction or shadows from IR. Then the other nice thing about these versus the Instamatic cameras is the elimination of backscatter. And backscatter is the air particulates that are in the air on a constant basis. And there's so many people out there that can't grasp the fact that when you're taking a picture with a flash and you've got an Instamatic camera, your flash and your lens are millimeters from each other. And you're catching all of those particulates within that range. Closer they are to the lens, the more transparent the ghost face becomes. And if people read the manuals, and I'm guilty of it too, I'll buy something and just want to dig right into it, but there is a specific spot in manuals on most cameras nowadays that tells you all about the orb phenomenon and how to eliminate that. And we don't eliminate them completely with these, but what we can use are flash diffusers. But in all honesty, we try not to use flash unless it's during the day. But we also know what to look for when it comes to the fact that, if some artifact does pop up in the camera, then, we go through it and we try the best we can to explain it. And about 99.9% of everything we've taken pictures of in the 7 years we've been around, we've explained away.
Or seen pictures of.
Some people are bummed that we don't have a whole bunch of evidence on our website, but I kind of like the fact that we don't have our page littered with stuff that any person could walk in and say, yeah, well, that's what it is.
Well, and people send us pictures too, and
Yeah.
we're able to
And
explain how to
the advent of the ghost apps for all the cell phones. I don't know how many times we get a picture of the little pioneer girl, and she gets around. She's been to Indonesia and the Czech Republic and even a little house in
She's an
California.
international ghost.
Yeah. So that being said, another piece of quality that we look at is audio. We're steering away from just the handheld. I'm freezing, by the way, so that's why I'm shaking right now. It's so cold in here.
It's the ghost.
The standard digital audio recorders that you can buy for $30 or $40 at Best Buy, we're steering away from those because the quality of the microphones just aren't there. There's so many artifacts that are being picked up by those. The noise floor is so much louder with those things, and if anybody doesn't know what the noise floor is, it's a natural hum that everything electronic puts off. And when you're listening to audio for hours on end, or even 10 or 15 minutes on end, you start hearing your name. I mean, I was guilty of it on our first investigation. I could have swore I heard my name like 4 times. But now what we're able to do, and there's some theories now that EVP and audio aren't actually sound. It's more of something that's an artifact of EMF frequency. So with this bad boy right here, the cool thing about this is we've got 2 condenser mics here. The condenser mics completely cut out all of that. It doesn't pick up any of the EMF frequencies. But when we're doing an audio session, we've got 2 XLR inputs on the bottom. So we can turn it into a 4-track recorder and record 4 different tracks simultaneously during the same session. The the standard dynamic mics have the voice coils in them that actually pick up those frequencies. And I know David Roundtree's done a lot of research on this, and he says that it's very repeatable. And he's stated that he's proven that the EVPs are actually created through the EMF spectrum and not the mechanical spectrum of sound. So that's something that we're experimenting with a lot. And we do a lot of experiments with the new equipment. Everything that we get, whether it's something that we've seen on TV, we field test the hell out of it. We want to make sure that we know everything possible that sets it off, whether it's the manipulation of the investigator themselves, walking by something, cell phones. Every time we're on an investigation, every cell phone goes to our command center, and even though they're not part of the, even though they're nowhere near the investigative area, they're always on airplane mode. If they're not on airplane mode, they're off, or they're in the car as far away from the site as possible. We also like to have live audio within a location, and we want that audio to be as crisp as possible because we want to be able to not only watch the DVR system and monitor where our investigators are and what they're doing, but we want to be able to hear what they're doing. And by doing that too, we can have an investigator at site 1 or site B, and we'll hear something on another level and say, hey, we just heard something, go check it out. So the technology, it's fun, but we realize that there are so many caveats with a lot of the equipment that we try to just kind of focus in on the things that really matter. It's the visual data and the audible data. And another thing now that we do is we're tracking a lot of the environmental data. So we track weather patterns for a particular day of the investigation, barometric pressure and dew points and things like that. That way we can build ourselves a database and say, okay, well, we experienced some stuff here. What was going on in that environment at that particular time that caused this spike or this EVP? So I don't know how many other teams out there are doing it like that, but I know that there's some people that we've been talking to that are developing new pieces of equipment that are kind of an all-in-one, that are not only, it's basically, and I was talking with one of our friends, that they're basically developing this piece of equipment that is the equivalent of the Ronco rotisserie. You just set it and forget it. Because you can set it up, depending on the size of your SD card, you can set up this device in a room, and not only is it recording the ambient air temperature, the barometric pressure of that room, it's recording the frequencies of the EMF that's within that field, the spikes and the ups and the downs. And then when he's done, you pop that SD card out, you throw it on your computer, you throw it in the software, and it gives you a graph. And he can take that graph and shoot it to somebody else and say, hey, why don't you go ahead and compare this to your investigation and see if there are any variables or trends. And that's kind of one of the big things that I know a lot of teams are doing now is, and it's good to see that they're not just doing the ghost hunting now, is they're actually getting into the research and the experimentation and really trying to find out the sweet spot of haunting or poltergeist activity or residual energy. That, as far as I can tell, is kind of where we're at the moment. I'm going to throw it over to Michael White.
Well, I'm speaking today?
Okay. Shocker. And he's going to talk about the analysis process that all of this stuff has to do with.
Thank you. First, I'd like to say I was honored that he asked me to take part of this. I really think highly of this team, so it was a real honor. But one thing I found out, that red circle that he was talking about earlier is meaningless, but if it's a green square, that's something. No doubt. I think evidence review and analysis is my second favorite thing when it comes to investigating and so forth. My first favorite thing, of course, is actually conducting the investigation and going out to the nicest piano bar that I can find afterwards. which usually are closed by the time we're done with investigations, and I really have to talk to people about that. I really like the data analysis because it brings me right back to where I originally came from doing all of this stuff, is doing surveillance, submarine force, where I actually had to kind of put things all together and come up with a mission brief. What did we really accomplish? What data did we get? When you're out there doing just a standard 4-hour investigation, and I shouldn't say standard, but I'm just going to use 4 hours of an investigation. And if you have a 4-channel DVR system and you're using 4 digital video or digital audio recorders, and you have your other equipment out there, you're looking at a lot of hours of data. So depending on how big your team is, you want to kind of distribute that, but you can't just say, hey, team member A, here you get 16 hours of video to watch. Because that video might not be where they're really the strongest. Some people are really strong with video, some people are really strong. Some people have audio down pat, and other people don't hear. For instance, I can't hear the 11 kilohertz range very good because I have a constant buzzing in my head. And oddly enough, my wife speaks at that range, so I don't know how those two things kind of came together. But when you're taking all of this data, it's all like a giant piece of a puzzle. And what you're really trying to do is screen through everything individually. And when you're screening that data, you've got to make sure that when you come across something interesting that you raise your left eyebrow, because it just makes you look that much more competent. But there's a lot of times where, let's face it, some of that data review is just agonizingly boring. But, okay, this is where I get to raise my eyebrow. In my book, I do have all the data sheets for reviews. And when I'm personally reviewing evidence, every single piece of data that I have, I'm going through and I am logging every single thing. So I'm going sheets and sheets and sheets on just 1 hour's worth of data. When I do find that one interesting piece, wow, yeah, it's Martha on that second. Thank you. All right, you do get a cut, buddy. I've lost what I was talking about. Okay.
All the data you get.
Oh, thank you very much.
Piece of information you like.
Especially the audio data. When I review audio, one thing that I need to make sure is that I can also see the waveform because there's a lot of times that you're listening and you're going to start to daydream and so forth, but that waveform right away is going to tell you something is coming up. Especially the size of that waveform will tell you how loud it's probably going to be. Because I like to listen to things up, I turn that volume up pretty good when I do it, because I want to hear the smallest piece. I also will look at the frequency spectrum. Some people will say, that they prefer wavehead. There are groups out there that just like to plug straight into the audio and listen to that. That's not going to give them a whole lot. There are some expensive programs out there that can, give you some really good information. Personally, I enjoy Adobe Audition. I think that that's a superior program. But there's also another one that's a lot less expensive out there called Goldwave. I think that's like $39 or something like that.
Yeah.
You can actually download an evaluation copy. It's not going to do as much for you as the registered version of that. But being able to see that frequency spectrum as well as that waveform is very helpful, especially when it comes to editing. If you have to modify it too much, raise the volume, take out the clutter, change the frequency of it, you've already destroyed it. It is not the original evidence that you got. If you mess with it enough, you can take crickets and turn them into voices of little children. So the whole idea is to try to screen through and figure out what you have. I think in my book, it's one of the few times in my life that I actually said something the way I meant to say it. going through this evidence is a lot like losing a diamond in a cat litter box. You've got to screen through a lot of crap before you find that one little gem. Okay? Because that's, that might be all that you get for the entire 4-hour investigation. It's just that one little piece. Now, where it really will kind of come together is when you combine the note-taking that was done on the investigation, usually at your base log or whatever you have there, taking notes during that investigation. If your investigators are out there diligently marking their audio devices with readings that they're getting in specific areas, at certain times, and that most importantly, at the very beginning of the investigation, you establish a time mark between all of your equipment. It's going to make it so much easier in the long run when you get back and you say, oh, okay, the video that we had here, the person writing down what was going on, there were people walking around in this room. Or we heard, we saw that, Investigator X had his hand in his pocket. That's where he usually keeps his change and so forth. So when you pick up that change jingling and that audio, those footsteps like you and I were talking about earlier, from the second floor, you can put all together and say, okay, that is not paranormal because this is all occurring at the same time. It's those little pieces that just didn't fit anywhere. That's what you're really looking for. And that's all I got. Any questions?
So, any questions for him before he takes out?
I think, are we going to do also a question?
Yeah, there needs to be. This is essentially your hour, so I want to make sure you guys have all of your questions answered. I'm really grateful that you guys left me as the anchor man because I could make or break this whole freaking class. So I could choose to ruin it right now and say we've proven that there are no such thing as ghosts anymore. Thank you, Oregon Paranormal. No, actually, so they've kind of put me in charge of talking about critical thinking. And like Michael, thank you, Oregon Paranormal, for having me take part in your class. Again, we're representing them. We want to do the best we can when we're helping to investigate for their clients or their locations. Critical thinking, and it's interesting that this becomes the last topic because critical thinking is something that has to happen through the entire investigation. It needs to happen before the investigation, as you're taking into consideration some of the history, which is a very touchy subject. In fact, at 4 o'clock when I have my talk, I want to talk a lot about the history. It's important to know some, but it can also taint your investigation as well. But as far as critical thinking throughout the investigation, you have a responsibility not only to the paranormal field, to yourself, but to the client, to provide them with something that you have thought through as much as you possibly can. And that could be something that puts them at ease. It could also be something that terrifies them. So you have to do a diligent job at critical thinking. And what that means, most of you, I'm sure, understand what critical thinking is. And how many people are completely new to investigating? I saw you raise your hand, are relatively new. Okay. So what that means is that means when you hear something, let's say you hear it over by the corner. And I'm the worst at it because I'm a very analytical thinker. There's got to be a reason for that other than a freaking ghost, right? I want there to be a ghost, but there's got to be something to it. It is your responsibility to sit there and try and understand what that noise came from. Did it come from a window? Was there a breeze blowing? Look at the trees outside. Spend some time in silence sitting in that corner waiting to hear it again. You may never hear it again. That doesn't, again, that means it was something trying to communicate with you. It could have just been a bug hitting the window at the time. So you have to really rely and mark your audio, mark your video, take notes, come back to that location. Don't assume that because you heard a noise that was something trying to communicate. We had a very good example last night when we had an EMF reader in a hallway, and it was getting some pretty high spikes. And to be a critical thinker and do a diligent job in an investigation, we would have had to have access to every part of the area we were in, which we didn't. So as I got close to the floor, the number would drop. If I came up to the ceiling, the numbers would drop. From wall to wall, the numbers would drop. But as soon as you put that reader in the center of the hallway, it started spiking really high. I couldn't find what it was coming from. It was odd. Was it paranormal? Probably not. Who knows? Maybe we caught something we might never know. But those are the kind of things that you really need to think through. And sometimes there's things that you, every possibility you have to consider, even if it's flippin' weird. You have to consider things like if a door rattles, is there another door or window that could be allowing air? So oftentimes, I don't know if you noticed, even when we were doing the class, last night we were doing EVP sessions in here, and I kept hearing a hum. Well, I'm still over here wandering around going, where was that hum coming from? But I'll walk over and I'll put my hand next to windows and just feel if there's any air. If a door happens to close or open, could opening another door or shutting it cause a vacuum? To cause that, it's funny because even when I think I might have had instances where something might have possibly taken place paranormal, I fight it because I'll go, well, maybe someone downstairs in the backside of the gym closed the door really hard and it caused some sort of weird airflow. I'll talk myself out of the possibility of a haunting, which is kind of funny. But that's an important thought process to have. And again, when these things happen, you have to make a note. If you're doing an EVP, say, please come back and listen to this again. Listen to it several times. Have everybody's input on it. If it's a location that you can get back to, if it's something you cannot explain, spend time back in that location to see if you can recreate it. Think about it a while. Anytime you have things that have happened in an investigation, if you know you're going back, review your notes to see where and when things happen so that you can revisit them. If you have something triggered upon questioning in a certain location, go back to that same location, if you can, around the same time, same conditions. Ask the same sort of questions to see if you get any responses to those. What you're looking for in an investigation is for any sort of repeatable responses, anything that will happen again environmentally that might be either proving or debunking the possibility of something going on. So, which is really funny because I'm not a really critical guy until it comes to this. Then I get all anal about everything I'm doing, and I have to think about everything. So, but again, keep in mind that is something you have to do throughout the entire investigation from start to finish. You have to do it because again, in the end, if you're working for a client, what you're presenting could ultimately affect, positive or negatively, how you're going to reveal this to your client. And the last thing you want to do is terrify someone when you never realized, oh, they have a pet hamster in the corner? I didn't even know that. You know, so you really have to do that. So, but I do want to make sure, this is your guys' class. I'm not sure if you guys had, you know, predetermined ideas of what you wanted from this class, but you have the entire team here and an opportunity to ask those questions. So that's what I would like you guys to do, is if there's something you really want from this class, ask it. Ask now, it's a good opportunity. Nobody has any questions?
I have one question.
Oh, yes, okay.
I know that all teams kind of present differently to clients, but I was wondering, I know you don't necessarily want to spill beans or anything, but how would you suggest being a good way to present to a client? Would there just be a verbal interview at the end? Would there be documented proof if it's available? Would it be a report out of some kind?
You're talking about at the end of the investigation?
Yes.
So, can I go with this?
Yeah, go ahead. And then I'll probably interject. Redact some of your information.
So we've done it in several different ways. It depends on our availability to get to a place and what we've found, right? So if we've gone to like Astoria or Eugene or something and we didn't find anything, it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to drive back down there. But we will, we'll talk on the phone, we'll email, Facebook sometimes. I don't do Facebook message to anybody, but we do also always keep our doors open. So even for people who have sent us a picture and we haven't necessarily done a full investigation for them, our doors are always, send us stuff if you feel like this. You know, if we do have an investigation, they have my personal cell phone. And I said, if you have something happen at 3 o'clock in the morning that freaks you out and you feel the need to call me, call me. I may not answer, right? But I'll call you back in the morning. Right? So our doors are always open, and we want to make sure, and it goes back to that sense of, if you don't feel comfortable, we haven't done our job very well, right? So we're going to if we do find evidence, we usually burn it onto a disk, give them a copy. If we can, we'll go sit down and have a meeting with them and say, okay, this is what we found. This is what could be explained as. This is, what are your questions? All those things, just to kind of, again, make them feel supported.
Another thing that, especially when it comes to doing a reveal of any sort, when it comes to talking with the clients after an investigation and the analysis process, the one thing that we never do is label something. We find it irresponsible on our part to say, we came into your home and we were there for 10 or 12 hours. You've got a demon. You've got a poltergeist. Anything like that. And if anybody can say that without a doubt, that can be very damaging to a situation. When we have an open door policy with all our clients, we always say not only are we there for the phone support and everything, but we welcome the idea of returning to a location multiple times. It's very important, and it's something we're not always afforded, is the opportunity to go back to a location over and over again. And over the years, we've had time at some very well-known locations. We've done a lot of work in the Shanghai tunnels. Hundreds of hours logged down there. And we've been able to do a lot of research in the Sumter area. So when we can go back to a location, it gives us more of a broader picture of what it is they may be dealing with. But still, again, labeling something it can be very detrimental to a case and damaging, and we don't like doing it.
Another thing I'd probably like to add to that really quick is have one member of your team, if possible, be the constant contact between the client and the team. The last thing you want to do is inundate them with multiple contacts, calling them all the time. And then they're going, who is this? What? Didn't I tell you this? If you have one contact, but it's that person's, hopefully they have social skills, but that contact really needs to have an understanding of the client and understand what it is their ultimate goal in having you investigate is. If they are truly terrified, it's going to mean far more to show up and present to them in person to comfort or tell them, yeah, you have a demon. But you really need to be aware of what your client is looking for. If your client is someone like, hey, you guys check it out, it's pretty cool, we're haunted, they're going to be fine with an email response. If you have a team in a house, and someone had personal experiences, maybe during the reveal, if the client was truly terrified, have the person who had the personal experience join you in the reveal to say, yeah, you know what, I had a personal experience, but I want you to know it wasn't scary at all. And that way they've got first-person recognition that, oh, this person experienced it and they're okay. That's not a bad thing.
Sometimes having a client take part in the investigation process can be a huge help to them. From time to time, they'll all leave us with the home, and that in and of itself is a huge responsibility on our part. But there are the occasions where they want somebody to stay behind, and we welcome that. We find that fine as long as they adhere to our process. We don't want them to be worried about walking around their own home during the investigation and muddying everything, but we also want them to be part of the investigation. So that we've seen, you can just see the pressure lift off their shoulders when they've spent 12 hours with us in their home, whether the lights are on or the lights are off. That is another thing that I kind of encourage with a lot of teams. Because a lot of people see it on TV where it's just the investigators, and you don't see that client interaction on an investigative level.
Okay. So have you ever decided to not share a piece of evidence with a client?
Oh, that's a good question.
I don't think we've ever not decided to share a piece of evidence because, that's theirs. The evidence is kind of something they own, and we've never come across that.
Yeah, where it's been like something very negative on an EVP, that's when they're already scared, we've made that decision to not share something that would be very scary as an EVP, we've gotten like things related to the devil or Satan or, you know, really, so.
I think my initial gut reaction to that is transparency, right? And wanting to, yes, this might freak you out,
Okay.
and here you go. Because we can never say this is how someone's going to take this.
Right.
We can assume, like if I punch Jay in the face, he's probably not going to take that as like, oh, I love you, right? Like, right? And I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. But like, I don't know how somebody's going to be able to take that and process it. So I want to share that with them, and then make sure I am there to help them process it. However they do, right? Now, I don't know this particular situation, so I wouldn't say you did wrong by not sharing. I don't want to say that at all. But my gut reaction is we're very open for everything, right? We want you to know this is something that's in there, and here's some other ways that you can process that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also consider the fact that by not providing that information, does it put them in jeopardy even further by not letting them know? And not necessarily for their physical safety, because again, I think it's very important to say, hey, look, we went in interrogating whatever was going on here, asking the questions, we're prompting this thing, we're still fine, we're okay. It's not going to cause any immediate damage. So now you have the opportunity, now you know, how would you like to address this now? Would you like resources for people, what religious faith are you? Because I do...
Faith is it.
Yeah, and that's an important thing, because oftentimes I do believe that when you bring in a religious faith to cleanse, clean, whatever you want to call it, you're doing it for the psychological aspect of the homeowner themselves. So we don't know what we're doing. You might bring a priest in and the ghost is Jewish for all I know. I don't know how this works. But again, you're providing them information that allows them to continue anything that needs ongoing investigation or for the further assistance if needed. So, but again, I don't know this specific case. They could be happy with their ghosts and it said something weird. For all you know, it was talking to you.
Oh, yeah. Probably.
You don't know.
Could be, often.
Has anybody got sick before? And if so, how did you cleanse yourself before or after?
Vomit.
Not seriously sick, you mean ill?
Well, yeah, you just
Nauseous.
Yeah, I got it, but it was food poisoning because I ate some cookies that the homemaker made. It was before I actually turned the water on and saw what was coming out of it.
That's a whole different aspect of the investigation is some of the places you have to go into. And
Yeah, there's a paranormal safety class.
Yeah.
Definitely check out.
Yeah. I had something follow me home once and woke me and my dog up, and all I can tell you is I heard footsteps in my house. I lived by myself with my dog, and it walked up. I heard it walk up to my bed, and I kind of woke up and just said, "Please leave me alone. Please go back to you should not be here. Go away." And turned and walked out. So that worked for me. I don't know if it's going to work for everybody.
I have yet to be on an investigation where someone has actually physically gotten ill. I have had headaches, or know of people who've had headaches or lightheadedness. Oftentimes, the person who's feeling that will say, all right, we'll get out, and then that's when I say, guys, and everybody comes over with the other equipment and starts checking everything, because that's when you start looking at the EMF levels and things like that. But yeah, a lot of it is up to personal experiences, because you do have the people that are more sensitive to things, and oftentimes they'll opt to leave. But it's your responsibility to notify your team, I don't feel right in here. So, and then remove yourself.
And EMF levels have a huge part in that sometimes. We did a case in a high-rise apartment complex in Portland, one of our first ever non-home settings. And it was just this big concrete loft apartment. And they had this huge fish tank right next to their bed. And the EMF level where their head was on the pillow was so high it pegged out all our machines and shut them down. And at the time, they're picking up shadows and these feelings of dread and anxiety, and they're feeling sick to their stomach. And our first response was, move the fish tank. Should be there anyways. It was huge. So they moved it, and all of the claims disappeared. So,
And those poor fish.
so it's not always a demon or anything in the home. It's sometimes it's a man-made issue that we're able to help them with, and that's another nice thing about it.
Any last questions? Because I know we're that late on time, but we also have a booth. So.
Speaking of safety, I know that sometimes some clients are a little more needy than other clients. And that there have been incidents where they're like constantly calling, I mean, they didn't get the answer they were looking for apparently. They're not interested in having you come back out and investigate per se, but they're like calling or pestering, or I mean, do you have a recommendation for handling that sort of thing?
We usually say, hey, there's another group that we would like you to contact, and then we just shove them to something.
One of the things we do is
There's a great group called SSPR, why don't you go?
Yeah, I was gonna say, SSPR is great, we send it to you.
when our initial contact with them, the first thing we ask them is, what do you hope to gain from this? We don't come in with proton packs and traps. We don't claim to rid any home of anything. What we hope to give you are coping tools and the validation that you either have something happening or you don't have something happening. And then hopefully they accept that. But we have had clients that even though they were told that, they felt that they still needed more to be done. And at that point, it's like, okay, well, we can give you some alternatives. These are some other groups that claim they can. We're not going to guarantee it, but you might want to try it.
We usually contact the groups also beforehand, so it's a warm transfer. Hey, listen, this is somebody who's coming in a little hot. So, cool.
So you don't do any clearing?
We don't clear anything, no, but we work with people who can.
Oh.
And so if people are interested in that, we have a list of resources that you can contact them. We won't do it for you, but you can definitely search for that.
Thank you.
I want to thank Katie for actually putting the And you guys were awesome, so thank you.
Yeah,
If you have
thank
more
you.
questions, our booth's downstairs. So.
And a lot of this equipment's on display. The DVR system's got a camera up so you can see clarity. Feel free to stop by.
Save your tomorrow.
Yeah, I did.
Oh, I will.